You've also just declared for Liz Truss in the leadership race. What do you think is the most important thing to talk about first?
Well, as Defence Secretary, looking after the people that give up so much to defend our country would be my first choice. And, today we've announced that we will roll out in full from September free wraparound childcare for all personnel serving in the military up to the age of 11, in other words, when their children go to secondary school. And we will fund after-school clubs and breakfast clubs that they all have in their schools and areas, and that could be up to £3,000 a child, because, the military doesn't work 9 to 5. Often daddies and mummies disappear for maybe 6 months at a time, and it's really important that we lean in and help them with that. And I'm very proud it's one of the things that I've helped deliver. It was in our manifesto, and it will make a real difference.
Mr. Wallace, good morning to you. Is childcare support an alternative to a pay rise?
No, they'll get a pay rise as well. They're already getting a pay rise. They also have. I've also frozen sort of in barracks feeding costs. I froze that. I rejected the recommended rise of that, and I've capped at 1% some of the accommodation charge increases. So I've tried to put as much of a package together. The armed forces always has a mixture of benefit. It's you don't just join and get a salary. You get a married quarter if you're married. You get accommodation and feeding. So they call it the X Factor. Long before there was that program, the X Factor, it was always factored into the pay package. And of course, it's a non-contributory pension scheme. So a lot of those things are really important.
Just very briefly, we are in a stage, aren't we, where if we're going to be a significant force on the world stage, we need to really invest in recruitment and retention, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Look, I mean, the Prime Minister gave me a record settlement of £24 billion over 4 years. We hadn't seen a proper investment in defence really since the Cold War. I'm very keen that investment continues, because the threats are growing. The world is more anxious. It's more insecure. That has an impact on our cost of living. That has an impact on food prices and fuel prices. So I'm incredibly keen that whoever is the next Prime Minister does that investment. And obviously within that are all sorts of factors around, how we look after our people.
Are you going to get that investment if Liz Truss is Prime Minister, as you've declared for Liz Truss? But what her big promise, if you like, is tax cuts. There's going to be less money in the coffers.
Well, there are two ways you deal with that. You reprioritise your government and what you are going to focus on. What I can tell you is, in these next couple of years, Defence is the only Whitehall department, and I'll repeat that, the only department amongst 20 who has a real term shrinkage, a negative in there. In other words, a cut to the defence budget, whereas some other departments have 7 or 8 or 9% increases. So I think first and foremost, you can reprioritise it. But secondly, Liz Truss has said by 2030 we will get to 3% of GDP. Now let's put that in perspective. We spend over 12% of GDP on health. In the Cold War we were spending nearly 4.5% of GDP on defence. So, side by side those things could coexist in the past. But also that means that the defence spending doesn't really need to have to start rising to get to 2030 by 2025. So we've got, 2.5 years before you would have to see a significant injection of cash into the defence budget. That's perfectly appropriate. I've spoken to a number of candidates about that. I'm not jumping up and down asking for more money right now. I'm asking for a long-term projected increase to meet the threats as they grow, and I think that's the right way. So Liz Truss's first and foremost consideration is the cost of living crisis and how to grow the economy, but the commitment really therefore doesn't start to see spending extra in defence as it graduates from 2025.
Ben Wallace, we've only got a few more seconds left with you, but I did just quickly want to ask you only declared last night for Liz Truss. What does she have that Rishi Sunak doesn't?
What you see is what you get. I've sat next to her. She has experience. She was everything from the nation's bookkeeper. She was the Chief Secretary of the Treasury for nearly 2 years in the Treasury. She was, at DEFRA, that's the Farming and Environment Brief. She's been the International Trade Secretary and the Foreign Secretary. She's got a lot of experience. Whoever is going to be the next Prime Minister needs experience, and they need to cover both the threats abroad and the economy at home. She's the only candidate that can do both.
Secretary